Hey guys, so I'm back again today and I wanted to talk about Dune. This is the new film coming out later on this year, um, directed by Denis Villeneuve. And this is obviously not like a review as such, well, not fully a review because it isn't out yet. But there's been a lot of interest about this film, at least within the sci fi kind of fan community. And definitely looking forward to this. I read the book a few years ago, actually, for the first time. I'd heard about it in the past, um, and but I hadn't really seen any of the movies, like the previous movie from the 80s or the sci-fi miniseries. And I read the book and I found it very interesting. I really liked it. I read the second one as well, which was just a short kind of continuation of the story. Um, and I think that the film itself, I mean, the story itself covers a lot of very interesting concepts. This would be kind of spoilers, so here we go. So anyway, it's like set far in the future, several thousand years into the future, humanity's kind of developed into various different kind of like different forms and whatever. There's all kinds of groups and subcultures and so on. And basically, the society is turned into basically a feudal society. You have like this um, emperor guy and like a court of these powerful families, and they're basically the noble families. They control various planets amongst them, control different parts of trade, and the story itself starts off and centers on Paul Atreides and his mother, and that their family, the Atreides families. Fortunes and misfortunes, and all the political intrigue of various other families competing and so on. So um, all that stuff is excellent. They live in a world that's far into the future. They have spaceships and so on, but it's difficult because of they have to have sort of human computers or people who are trained and genetically engineered to be able to do calculations and so on in order to maintain the actual society and economy that they have, including traveling in the spaceships that they have, because they used to have computers as we know them and AIs and robots and stuff, but that was a huge crisis when basically the Terminator kind of story happened, the robots took over, and then finally there was a huge kind of war against them and so on, and then the humans were successful again, similar to Terminator again. Um, so, um, but then then they have to continue the intergalactic lifestyle or interplanetary lifestyle. So they need to have different forms, and there's all kinds of substances in the spice and the planet, the Dune planet, where the so-called spice comes from, and helps people. It has all these various properties and so on. So all of these things are good, and it's a very interesting story. It's really good science fiction, and it's a basis of a lot of science fiction because this came out back decades ago, when it was first written, and has obviously had a lot of impact on various other works and so on that have come out since then. And um, it's very like the story was visionary, and it's just amazing how these people came up with these amazing ideas back then and so on. Um, so as you can probably tell, I'm very excited to actually watch this movie. It's sad that because of the current situation with the virus and so on, we won't probably it'll be delayed or it might be dangerous to see in the cinemas, so won't get the full experience of it. But based on they've released some stills from the movie, and it looks really good. They've got like seems like a really good cast in there, and I liked uh, what's his name from from Henry V. So it's definitely something I would definitely enjoy and watch. My concerns about this story, about this movie, um, really stem from I'm sure they've done it well. I mean, we'll see what happens, but I'm sure it's well made and so on. But my concern is that in this like in the current kind of climate, it's just unfortunate, and I think I wonder if it won't do as well because people won't like to see won't be so interested in this sort of, like I always say, these fantastic stories of um the future and spaceships and strange looking people and aliens and whatever. you know I always enjoy these stories. I find it really nice to look at these kind of things, and I think most of the science fiction fans, that's what we look for. We like to see predictions of the future and like technologies, and looking at how, trying to predict how humans, as we are, would what kind of politics they would have and so on, and their interactions when you have more and more, set in the future in a different sort of civilizational space. But I think that there's always this limiting factor, and as I've kind of mentioned before as well, people, I don't know, it just seems like people aren't as receptive to sci-fi as they used to be. And I'm not going to include stuff like, I mean, Star Wars is a completely different sort of phenomenon. With this kind of new story, and the other thing which I was thinking about, was the whole premise of the thing. I just searched for Dune 2020, and the thing that comes up on my search, the summary line from IMDb basically says Paul Atreides leads nomadic tribes in a battle to control the desert planet Arrakis. And what does that sound like? It sounds like some kind of like. It sounds a bit like Avatar. It sounds a bit like Lawrence of Arabia. It sounds a bit like, the 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 classical kind of thing of this like civilized guy has to come and save a bunch of nomadic people whose homeland is being exploited, or nomadic or whatever, primitive, or living in a more primitive lifestyle. People are, their homeland's under threat and it's been exploited all these, decades and centuries even, and he comes from, the exploiting people, and he's the one who can save them. So it's the same kind of, I think it's a basis based on this, the time that the story came out from. It's where, let me be clear here, I like the story. I find it enjoyable. But I think maybe it's to do with the time that this came out of. So it's basically from 1960s USA. This was a time when, the USA and the West were, massively booming. They were enjoying sort of all the dividends of the capitalist system, and they were full of brimming with self-confidence and so on. And then they look upon, other people's, these sorts of people as, or this sort of setting as, these primitive people being exploited and need to be saved. And it's the general kind of that hippie-ish sort of message that is kind of patronizing in a way. It's, we have like the same thing with Avatar too. That was a criticism leveled of it. Again, I enjoyed the film Avatar. I liked it. I didn't want to, like, without any of this political stuff on the side of it. But it just seems like, it's the same. That's the same thing as this. It's just some guy from the developed place has to come and save all these people. And I don't know how much this sort of story is going to resonate really with the general public, and that's a shame. It really is a shame, because the story and so on is really, really good. It's very interesting to read and so on. And the message itself, actually, from the story is about the danger of these messiah figures. So, I mean, even the message that comes out of the story is actually good. But I don't know. I mean, this is just something I was just thinking of, and I mean, I really hope this isn't the case. But I feel like it's kind of like a trope, basically, and it's sort of out of date, I feel like. That's my thing. Why couldn't it be, actually speaking, why couldn't it be that it was a Fremen person who, realized that they're being exploited and, worked to, bring some kind of liberty and so on to his people, which actually is more reflective of real life. And actually, a lot of in human history, if we're going to look at this as an epic story of humanity, describing humanity, that's more likely what happened. A lot of these places, there was, through the 60s, in fact, and in the 40s to 60s, all these liberation figures came out of the formerly like colonized countries. It was people from these kind of oppressed communities or colonized places who led the struggle for their freedom and independence. It wasn't really outsiders coming in and saying, let's, let me help you become free. So I think that's something that kind of, that now that I think about it, kind of like resonates through a lot of these stories. But anyway, I really do hope that this does well. I'm not so certain about how, assuming that this movie does well, and I think they've been comparing it to Lord of the Rings and Star Wars and trying to make some kind of franchise going. I really hope that they haven't made this film with that, obviously being the character of this story, of this movie. I mean, that they're kind of setting things up and not fully explaining things because they want to expand upon them in the next the next movie, the next movie, the next movie. I don't know how receptive people are going to be to this sort of this story and getting a series of movies in, following it. But anyway, I hope it does well. I mean, from the still images, they're just still images, but you can kind of tell like the general tone and character of the way this has been produced based on like what they've released, and it does look like they've taken it seriously. They're not doing it in a silly way. Hopefully it will do well. So anyway, that's it for now. I'll probably have more thoughts later, and hope you guys enjoyed listening to this. Please thank you for listening, and please let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you so much.